Was Tiberius Gracchus a noble martyr who tried to save the Roman poor from starvation, or was he a dangerous demagogue who shattered the constitution to feed his own ambition? It's the question that marks the beginning of the end of the Roman Republic. To the common people, the populares, he was a saviour who dared to stand up to the aristocracy. To the Senate, the Optimates, he was a tyrant-in-waiting, a man who would tear down the traditions of the ancestors to make himself a king. But there is a tragedy in the story that goes beyond simple politics. By trying to fix a broken economic system through radical means, Tiberius inadvertently introduced a new element into Roman politics: violence. Before him, political disputes were settled with debates and votes. After him, they were settled with clubs and daggers. Was he the surgeon trying to cut out the cancer of inequality, or did he accidentally kill the patient on the table? Let's find out. To understand the crisis that Tiberius walked into, we must look at the Roman world in 133 BC. On the surface, Rome was invincible. It had crushed Carthage in the Punic War, dominated Greece, and was the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. The tribute money was flowing in, and the slave markets were overflowing. But this victory carried a poisoned chalice. The influx of wealth and slave labour fundamentally broke the Italian economy. For centuries, the backbone of the Roman military and state had been the smallholder farmer, the citizen soldier who owned a small plot of land, farmed it to feed his family, and picked up the sword to fight for his country when called upon. However, the wars had kept these men away from their farms for years, sometimes decades. While they were away fighting in Spain or Africa, their farms fell into disrepair or were brought up by the ultra-wealthy senatorial class. These aristocrats used the massive influx of slave labour to create latifundia. These were industrial-scale mega-plantations. A free Roman farmer could not compete with a senator who owned 10,000 acres farmed by gangs of slaves who cost nothing in wages. The result was a demographic catastrophe. The small farmers, displaced and bankrupt, flocked to Rome in their thousands. They became the proletari, a class of citizens who owned nothing but their children. They filled the slums of the city, unemployed, hungry and angry. Meanwhile, the rich became obscenely rich, building villas that rivaled palaces. The military manpool, which relied on men meeting a property requirement to serve, began to dry up. Rome was conquering the world, but it was hollowing itself out from the inside. Into this powder keg stepped Tiberius Gracchus. He was not a man of the people by birth, he was blue-blooded aristocracy. His father had been a censor and consul twice. His mother, Cornelia, was the daughter of Scipio Africanus, the man who defeated Hannibal. Tiberius was raised in the heart of the establishment, tutored by Greek Stoics and expected to lead the Senate. But whilst travelling through Etruria on his way to a military posting in Spain, he observed the countryside. He saw that the fields were tilled not by free Roman citizens, but by foreign slaves in chains. The sturdy Italian peasantry had vanished. He realised that if this trend continued, Rome would run out of soldiers, and the vast population of angry poor would eventually turn on their masters. By the way, if you're new here, I make ancient history content, so if that's your thing, leave a like and subscribe. In 133 BC, Tiberius was elected tribune of the plebs. This was a powerful office created centuries earlier to protect the common people from the abuses of the Senate. A tribune had the power of sacrosancy, making it a religious crime to actually touch him, and crucially the power of veto against any act he deemed against the people. Tiberius wasted absolutely no time. He proposed the Lex Sempronia Agraria, the Sempronian agrarian laws. The law was technically not even radical, it was merely reinforcing a statute that had been on the books for years, but simply ignored. The Licinian Sexton law, which limited the amount of public land that any one individual could occupy, around about 300 acres. Over generations, wealthy senators had simply squatted on this public land, treating it as their private property. Tiberius proposed to reclaim any land held over the legal limit and redistribute it to the landless poor in small lots. To sweeten the deal, he even offered to pay the senators for the land they surrendered and allowed them to keep the legal limit ownership free. Reasonable perhaps, but to the Senate this was a declaration of war. They viewed this public land as their ancestral heritage. They had villas on it, they buried their ancestors there, and they used it as collateral for dowries and loans. They saw Tiberius not as a reformer but as a traitor to their class, who was buying the favour of the mob. Instead of taking the bill to the Senate for debate, the custom, though not really the law, Tiberius took it directly to the Concilium Plebeians, the plebeian assembly. This was a direct insult to the Senate's authority. The senators, realising they could not outvote the angry masses, turned to a political tool of their own. They found another tribune, Marcus Octavius, and convinced him to veto Tiberius's bill. Now this is the moment it all goes completely wrong. The Roman constitution was an unwritten collection of laws, precedents and norms known as the way of the ancestors. It relied on mutual restraint. A tribune could veto another tribune, but it was rarely done on a matter of such importance. Tiberius begged Octavius to withdraw the veto. Octavius refused. Tiberius then did something unprecedented. He argued that a tribune who acted against the interests of the people was no longer a true tribune. He called for a vote to strip Marcus Octavius of his office. Now, unsurprisingly, the assembly voted overwhelmingly to depose Octavius. Physically, Octavius was dragged from the rostrum. With the veto removed, the agrarian law passed. A commission was set up to oversee the land redistribution. consisting of Tiberius, his younger brother Gaius, and his father-in-law. The Senate was annoyed. They had been outmaneuvered, but they held the purse strings. They simply refused to fund the Agrarian Commission, granting Tiberius a pitiful budget that would barely cover his scribe stationery. Then luck, or maybe fate, intervened. King Attalus III of Pergamon died, and having no heirs, bequeathed his entire wealthy kingdom to the Roman people. Tiberius immediately proposed a bill to use the royal treasury of Pergamon to fund the land commission, bypassing the Senate's control of finance entirely. This was a direct attack on the Senate's traditional prerogative over foreign policy and finance. The senators began to spread rumours that Tiberius had demanded the royal diadem of Pergamon and intended to make himself King of Rome. As Tiberius' year as tribune neared its end, he faced a dilemma. Once he left office, his immunity would vanish. The senators made it very clear they intended to prosecute him for violating the constitution, specifically for deposing Octavius. To protect himself and ensure his work continued, Tiberius announced that he would run for a second consecutive term as tribune. Now, this was legally grey. While not explicitly illegal, it was practically unheard of and violated the custom of term limits designed to prevent tyranny. To the Optimates, this was proof of his monarchical ambitions. On the day of the election, the atmosphere in Rome was toxic. Voting was taking place on the Capitoline Hill. Tiberius appeared with a guard of supporters. During the chaotic proceedings, a rumour reached the Senate, meeting nearby in the Temple of Fides, that Tiberius had gestured to his head. Now, Tiberius had meant that this was the signal that his life was in danger. The senators claimed he was demanding a crown. Scipio Narcissa, the Pontifex Maximus, and Tiberius' own cousin stood up in the Senate. He demanded the consul take action to save the Republic from the tyrant. The consul, a lawyer, simply refused to use force without a legal decree. Narcissa, furious, shouted, "Since the consuls betrayed the state, let those who wish to save the laws follow me." He threw the helm of his toga over his head, a ritual act of sacrifice, and led a mob of senators and their clients out of the temple. They armed themselves with broken table legs, clubs and stones. They charged up the Capitoline Hill. The immense prestige of the Pontifex Maximus and the senators caused the crowds to waver. In the ensuing stampede, Tiberius was beaten to death. It is said that Scipio Narcissa himself may not have struck the blow, but another senator bashed Tiberius' brains out with Narcissa's footstool. 300 of Tiberius' supporters were slaughtered that day. Their bodies were not given a proper burial. They were dragged through the streets and thrown into the Tiber River like common criminals. It was the first time in history of the Republic that political blood had been shed in the Forum. The death of Tiberius Gracchus solved absolutely nothing. The land crisis remained, the anger of the poor remained, but the taboo against political violence had been absolutely shattered. Tiberius had shown that the powers of the tribune could be weaponized to bypass the Senate. The Senate had shown that if they could not win by law, they would win by murder. The glue of mutual respect that had held the Republic together had dissolved. Some historians argue Tiberius was a naive idealist who pushed too hard too fast. Others see him as a necessary corrective that the rigid aristocracy refused to accept. But his death set a precedent that would haunt Rome. If a tribune could be killed for being too radical, then a general could, say, march on Rome to restore order. The cycle of escalation had begun. The blood on the Capitoline Hill would not dry. It would flow into the careers of Marius, Sulla, Caesar, and finally Augustus. The Republic did not fall in a day, but the first stone was cast here in 133 BC. Thanks for watching and listening. If you have any questions or video suggestions, plop them down below in the comments and I'll add them to the list. Remember to like, comment and subscribe. I've been the Ancient History Guy and I'll be seeing you later.